accountants and advisors. The China Expert Series is here to educate and celebrate mistakes made by foreign investors whilst doing business in China. It includes personal stories from the China experts on the challenges they've experienced in the market, how they've overcome them, and what pieces of advice they can share with those of you who are just starting out. My name is Kristina Kohler-Kalucia, and I'm a Hong Kong-born European with over 20 years experience in helping foreign investors enter the China and Hong Kong market. My mission is to help foreign investors, leaders, entrepreneurs avoid the most common obstacles that they encounter along their China business journey for them to accelerate their profitability. I hope you enjoy the episode. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another podcast episode of Thrive in China. Today, I am really happy and pleased to have Adam Sandzer on. Adam, my usual spiel is that people need to introduce themselves. They're always going to do it better than I am. So I let you start off today's podcast. Let us know a little bit about yourself, where you're from, where you're based, and what you do.
No problem. Thank you. Nice to be here. And yeah, great to have the opportunity to talk a little bit about who I am and what I do, and particularly my experiences of working with China. So yeah, Adam Sandzer. I've been working with China for over 15 years now, predominantly helping global brands to enter and grow in the market from a commercial perspective. I've done a lot of business modeling, financial planning, partner sourcing, partner management, really typical business development stuff. And I cut my teeth at a company called Pentland Brands, largely working on the world's biggest swimwear brand, Speedo, and lots of other sports brands. And then I joined Hot Pot China coming up for 6 years ago. And for those of you who don't know, Hot Pot are also very much focused on helping global brands to enter and grow in the China market. We do a lot on the brand and marketing side, helping our clients, again, to understand who their target audiences are, how their brand should be positioned, and what they need to do from a marketing perspective to ultimately get the right cut through in the market, and then simultaneously bringing that commercial element to it. Personally, I'm based in the UK right now. I did live in China, largely across Ningbo, Beijing, Shanghai, Hangzhou for the best part of 10 years. But I am now settled here in the UK. I'm married, I have twin boys, and that typically takes up a lot of my personal time, as you can imagine. Absolutely.
I don't have twins, but definitely with 2 kids, it's already enough, isn't it?
Fun times in my house.
Exactly. Stay positive. So, Adam, when did you first arrive in China? And I mean, I think always people are interested in why China. How did that come onto your radar?
It's a little bit random, actually, as I'm sure most people's stories are when they start with China. But I studied economics at school, and for some reason or another, my economics teacher, every topic seemed to turn to China: fastest growing economy, fastest consumption rates, the growth of e-commerce, whatever it was China. And I'm like, okay, great. I don't know much about this market, but sounds interesting. I then had the privilege of being able to travel around the world after I finished my A-levels and before I went to university. And I went to Europe, I went to Australasia, I went to Asia, and everywhere I went, I saw these huge Chinese tour groups. And I thought, wow, okay, maybe there is something in this. And I arrived at University of Nottingham back in 2005, and I was due to study straight management studies. And I was looking at the degree, and I was reading through it. I was thinking, this looks really boring. I don't know if I'm going to enjoy this, actually. So I turned over the page, and on the next page, it said management with Chinese studies. And as it turned out, University of Nottingham had their own campus in Ningbo, China. And with management of Chinese studies, you would get to learn about the history, the culture, the politics, the economics. You get to learn the language, and you get to spend most of your second year in Ningbo in China.
Oh, really?
Oh, That sounds interesting. So most people, when they start university in the UK, go to the pub for a drink.
Sure.
I went to the administration office and changed my degree to management with Chinese studies. And from there, I never looked back. Management studies was, as I thought, boring. Chinese studies was fascinating. I loved learning the language. My time in China on the Ningbo campus as the first undergraduate student there from Nottingham was incredible. And there was only one place that I was going once I graduated, and that was to Beijing to really hone my language skills, to start building work experience and growing from there.
So when did you arrive in Beijing?
So actually, my first trip to Beijing was summer 2006, where I was a teacher at Tsinghua University. They had an English-speaking summer camp. So that was my first China experience. I lived on campus dorms. I went to the student canteen, and that was my like wow moment, because obviously the scale of Beijing, the politics of Beijing, the culture of Beijing.
Yeah.
It was just like incredible, and mixing with the next generation, who are probably now the business leaders in China, was an amazing opportunity before actually then going to study there in Ningbo that September.
Very interesting. So what then started off? I mean, you then graduated from University of Nottingham, but what then pulled you to China? I mean, I guess you always had it in the back of your mind that you were going to go back, but what pulled you? What was the career opportunity that pulled you in that direction?
So it was push and pull. I graduated in 2008, which you might recall was financial crisis year. So I was looking at trying to get a job, but I couldn't find anything that I really wanted here in the UK. And then at the same time, I had this itch that I needed to go back to China and I needed to explore. I was lucky to get a research-based job in a private equity firm. So I had some work experience there, a little bit of money in my pocket, but not really kind of enough to sustain me. And I wasn't learning the language enough. So I decided to put myself into school again and really ingrain the language into me. And, you know, I definitely did that for a really intense 6-month period. I continued to teach English to top up my my pay the rent. But yeah, that was it. And then I was always passionate about brand and always passionate about sport. And I had an amazing opportunity to join Pentland, who wanted actually me to come back to the UK for a year or so, to essentially have a master's degree in the sports and fashion industry, to really understand their business, but also the category. And then it was a case of, right, you know China, you now know our business, go out and help us make it happen for Speedo. And it was an incredible opportunity for me, because I got to basically do anything and everything that I would have wanted to do, from right away from sort of designing a product, selling a product, marketing a product.
So I'm curious. I haven't asked anybody this question, but I'm now, I want to bring it up with you, because it seems like you were quite close to the company and also the brand. So your backstory is very similar to most people we've heard here. You know, how do expats or foreigners get into the China realm? It's through their studies, through a friend saying, why don't you come on a backpacking trip with me to China? Starting off teaching to get that experience and learning intensive Chinese. So I'm curious. I mean, you had a little bit of work experience, but how did you sell yourself to this company, newly graduated, to kick this off? Because it's a huge project, right? It's a huge project to say to somebody now, go off to China and build our business. And you were what, in your 20s?
Yeah.
Early 20s? I mean, who does that? Like, it's like, so, but I also know this is not the only story. I know a lot of companies do this, and I know a lot of people, especially older people, are not necessarily, when I say older, I mean my age now, when they have families, they're not always willing to go to China and be so far away from family. So it is harder to find people with experience. But I'm just curious, why did they take that route of hiring? I mean, I don't want to say they did anything bad, but I'm just curious, what was their mindset and their thought planning and strategy of hiring a new graduate where this was their big first experience?
Yeah, I wore a nice suit and tie to the interview and talked a good game. I think, look, the China experience was there. Remember, I've been in and out the country for 3 or 4 years. I had a little bit of work experience, but actually it was the cultural understanding, the language skills, the ability to fuse that with my natural understanding of brand and natural understanding of being a consumer that I think appealed to them. But ultimately, yeah, they took a chance on me. And I had to prove myself at every turn. You know, it wasn't like I was sent straight to China. I had a year, 18 months where they could have a really good look at me back in the UK, you know, back and forth to China a little bit. Even my first rollout in China was a 9-month secondment, or positioned as a 9-month secondment. And yeah, I had to prove myself at every turn. And thankfully, I guess I did. And then you know, one thing led to the other, and I got more and more responsibility over time to the point where we were knocking down a distribution network and building a subsidiary. And, you know, from there, you know, it was incredible. I always feel very fortunate that I had that experience, you know, end-to-end value chain from a young age to do that. And, you know, I was definitely lucky, but I would also say that I presented myself in a way that was appealing. Because I understood China. And
so how long were you with the company for? I mean, what was the China journey that you stayed with them for?
8 years.
8 years.
So I did 8 years. I did 18 months in the UK. Then I did the rest
but kicking off the China project from the UK.
No, they actually wanted me to. I was in touch with it, so I went out to Hong Kong. I went out to Shanghai. I met people. I learned the business out there.
Yeah.
But the objective was more to understand the broader business and get involved in the broader business, build relationships back in the UK. Because ultimately, and this is something I'm sure we'll talk about a bit later, it was all about trust. Suddenly, this huge company had someone that they knew and trusted on the ground in China, and someone that was coming back with, this is the reality, this is what we need to do to win long term. And it wasn't just someone that, you know, was an arm's length away that you saw maybe 2 or 3 times a year. It's someone that was in and around the business for 18 months who worked very closely with our CEO and had that level of trust.
So what did you see? Oh, I have so many questions. And I don't want to forget them. In those 8 years, what were the challenges that you were experiencing building up this business? And I'm curious about the dynamic with the HQ, being back and forth, traveling between UK, China. Is it easier to be in China? There's so many questions I have about that whole dynamic as well. So, you know, what were the challenges that you experienced? And I'm pretty sure those challenges evolved over time, because you have certain challenges when you're starting up. You have other challenges as you're growing and scaling, right? But I'm just curious if you can sum it up or give some insight into what some of those things were, and how would you do them differently today?
There's a lot to.
There's a lot to unpack.
There's a lot to unpack. But you hit the nail on the head, and you know, ultimately, it's about people, right? And building that relationship and building trust. And I had a particularly nuanced challenge because I was coming in quite a high-profile role, and working with very senior stakeholders. Were like, who the hell's this guy? Like, I don't care that he got A's in his A levels or whatever he got in his GCSEs. Like, who the hell is he? So initially building their trust and their relationship, but then I had a very nuanced challenge of embedding myself into a local distribution partner, and they were like,
it was a distribution partner in China or in China,
and they're like, this guy's a spy. Like, he's coming to spy on us. He's coming to like
But they knew that immediately, or they
well, that was their preconception of me.
okay.
And what I had to build a genuine positive relationship with them. And that was my biggest challenge of all. And I remember the first time I met them, I had to make an introduction. And I stood up and I said, you know, I'm Adam, and in Chinese, I spoke in Mandarin because I thought it'd be good to ingratiate in that way. And I said, in England, when we introduce ourselves, we say something that we like, and I like football. And one of the sales guys, I was a little bit nervous about what I was going to eat when I first went to China. And one of the cheeky sales guys shouted out, and Adam likes eating tofu, because he'd heard that I was a vegetarian. And I kind of just rolled with it and then became Mr. Tofu. And I was okay with that. Like, you know, and it was those sorts of things that kind of just, you know,
eased everything. I
had to really, and I had to show that I was willing to travel everywhere with them. I was willing to eat any food. I was willing to drink with their distribution partners. And in the end, they saw me as an advantage because, as they often told me, your long nose is quite useful in our negotiations. So they would drag me along to like far-flung China. I went to Hulu Island, Jingcheng City, you know, Chengdu, Qingdao, Xi'an, Dalian, literally everywhere with them, which helped them because it helped their negotiations with their clients, but also helped me to really understand.
But why did it help? I'm curious. Why did it help them with their negotiation? What did you bring as an added value?
I think it showed the way they positioned it and the way I positioned it was, you know, the global brand is really committed to this market. The global brand is hiring people who understand our culture, who understand our language and want to help. And that was the key thing. I had to show them that I was there to actually help. I wasn't there to undermine them.
Sure.
They told me we needed better female swimwear. They told me that there was an issue with our goggles quality. They told me that there was, you know, online was about to explode in China and we needed to do something about it. And I went back to the business and I unlocked resources for them. So they were like, okay, this guy
knows how to do, knows how to manage the HQ.
I mean, at the same time, I was telling HQ that, you know, there's potentially some challenges here on the brand building side, and we may need to do more, but may need to take a little bit more direct control of certain elements. But really, actually, I was as much a part of their team as I was as much part of the global team. I think that's where I worked effectively because I had the trust of the local partners. And I had the trust of the global team.
But I think what's also interesting is that, I mean, you said that in the end, you brought everything in-house, right? And I think it's interesting that in that journey, you saw what the distributors' strengths and weaknesses were. Do you feel that it was easier to see that by being on the ground and traveling with them than doing, 100%. I don't know, one-off trips every so often?
100%.
Yeah.
I learned so much, and even when I was just in China, you know, being on the ground, being there, seeing things for your own eyes. You know, you can read as many articles as you want, you can talk to as many people as you want on WeChat. You've got to see things to believe them, and you've got to experience things collectively and together to really see it. One of the things I did when I first joined as well was I insisted on working in a retail shop in Shanghai. So I actually was on the shop floor selling to Chinese customers. And I actually remember there was a customer came in looking for some flip-flops for his daughter. And it was the Olympics at the time, and Speedo had an Olympic-inspired range. He said to him, "Oh, you know, these flip-flops are from our Olympic-inspired range. And by the way, we have a whole collection on that side for, you know, male, female kids. You know, here's the suit, here's the shorts, here's the flip-flops, here's the goggles." And he bought the whole set for himself, his wife, and his daughter. And I just remember thinking, okay, wow, okay, this is the power of, you know, I think I may have said something like, oh, Michael Phelps wore this goggles or something like that.
Mm.
And, you know, it was just a great experience for me. And I was like, okay, that working on the shop floor,
Yeah,
just so powerful in terms of, you know, understanding what was going on in the market and talking to the stores.
I think it's amazing that you had that experience. Do you feel like, I mean, you're doing that with a Western mind and speaking in Chinese, but I'm just curious. You obviously had other shop assistants, salespeople next to you, right? Do they sell in the same way?
No, they didn't have that mindset. And I think they actually learned quite a lot from me being there.
Right.
Latterly, we introduced a retail marketing program, actually, which helped the store staff to sell.
Like a training program on how to sell and how to
exactly.
sell.
I mean, it came from our global, the global team led it,
Right.
and myself and my team helped to kind of localize it.
Yeah.
And obviously deliver it in terms of the training. But you know, we had this product, look good, sell more, and winning stores, and it was all about identifying the winning stores, helping the store staff to, you know, make the store look right, merchandise in the right way, and then actually, you know, sell more by talking the right way.
By talking to people.
So, I found it was actually very interesting going back into retail now. You know, it always used to be, oh, Huan Yin Guan Lin, like everyone's really excited to see you. And I was quite amazed at how many store staff were like head down in their mobile phones. I initially thought, wow, that's rude. Like, what's going on here? And then I realized that actually now customer service is not necessarily with a smile, it's with an emoji, because they're talking to their private clients on WeChat. And like, I think that's one thing, you know, what I did 10 years ago is obviously very different to now. At the time, the principles apply. I still think there's a lot to be learned and a lot to understand in terms of how to optimize your selling techniques. Yeah.
But I think it's really interesting that you actually went into the retail store.
Yeah.
To physically have that experience.
Yeah, I was insistent on it. I think even the distributor was like, that's a bit weird. Like none of their management team would have done that. You know, it almost felt like it was beneath them.
So I always find it, you know, I always find it fascinating. You always need this one outsider. I also look at my husband who's in the F&B sector, and anywhere we go in the world, he will do a supermarket check.
Mm.
And he's in the chocolate sector. And so he's walking up and down the aisles. He's looking at product, and he's a finance guy. My husband's not even a marketeer. He's a finance guy. And he's still walking up and down the aisles, looking at product placement, looking at cost, prices, understanding his competitors' pricing. And he will do that wherever we travel. And I've always found it fascinating. And he said, but this is the information I need to go back to say, and because, you know, finance guys are always the evil ones, saying, no, this is not right. Look at what our competitors are doing, you know. And when he starts bringing in other types of insights, it's a matter of how to improve the business, right?
Yeah.
How can we do better?
It's integral. And it still is.
And how do you understand it? How do you understand being in a shop and in a retail space and observing the customers walking down the aisle? And
it reminds me, actually, we work Decathlon. We actually started working with some of the strategic global accounts directly. And one of them was Decathlon, and we had a really nice business with them. But they were looking to focus on their own brands and shift out the international brands. And I was convinced that was the wrong move, not just for us, but for them. So I actually went to stores I think I went in Chengdu, Shenzhen, Shanghai, Beijing, and I just stood and watched the goggles aisle. And it was fascinating how many people went in, picked up a Speedo goggle, tried it on, was like, wow, and then went and bought the Decathlon own brand.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Obviously, some of them took away the Speedo goggle, but almost everyone tried on the Speedo goggle because it was the brand and because it was the, you know, the reputable one, and then bought the cheaper Decathlon
version. Yeah.
And I said, you need Speedo because we anchor your brand.
Yeah.
What you'll end up doing is you'll end up not having that. And then what are people going to try? So it convinced them to retain us another year or two.
Oh, really?
And yeah, I was quite proud because we lasted longer than Nike and Adidas. But yeah, looking at on the shop floor was just so vital to watch what people do.
Absolutely. So what was the reasoning then to, or what were the triggers to push the company to go it alone? Because I think a lot of people, or at least the sense I get for a lot of people is, the distributor's doing fine. They're growing, maybe not as fast as we would like them to, but they're still growing, and we're delegating. And it's going to require investment. It's going to require more resources if we do it on our own. So what were the triggers then, or what for you, how did you go to the board and say, we got to do this alone now? And here are the reasons why.
Yeah, we never actually got to that point where we said that, because the business was segmented in several ways, and it was phased over time. I think, the first thing we took control of was product and making sure that we had the right product for market. Next element was brand and taking an element of control over brand execution and campaigns, and the way that it was presented in campaigns and online and offline and in store, etc. So it was phased, and then on the commercial side, it was like, we've got to get a hold of e-commerce, because we suddenly have, every man and his dog selling the same product on the same platform, and it's a race to the bottom. We've got to control. We can't really control it, but you've got to take control of that in sense of, we're going to take online direct. And then there was this big kind of wholesale offline business, which we were quite happy to allow the distributor to continue to operate. But once we took off online, they were like, no, we're out. And we basically had. Pardon?
Why were they? Well, why was that there? I mean, why not keep a piece of the pie?
There's always an emotional element to it. Online was the fastest growing channel. Online was where all the excitement and glamour was. If you're not letting us run the brand, if you're not letting us run online, offline is not that exciting to us. And it was amicable. I'm still close with the distributor today. I met her in China, in Shanghai, when I was just there. So, there was no majorly hard feelings, particularly on my side. And then, we had about a month to try and take that wholesale business direct, which was quite an interesting project.
That's heavy to have 30 days to do that in.
Yeah, I think there were like 60 customers, and basically I had the list, I had their sales performance, I picked the top 20. A Chinese colleague and I traveled the breadth and depth of China to go and visit them and basically secure a direct relationship. And I guess ultimately everyone was happy because they were able to work directly with the brand, earn more margin. And I think it worked initially. Obviously time changes things, and I left the business 6 years ago now, so I have to speak to some of my ex-colleagues to see
Sure. But it looks like it eventually became a great success. But what are some of the daily challenges that you faced running this?
Well, on the personal side, I actually decided that it was time to move home. So once the subsidiary had been set up and I was part of that project, and it also worth saying that it was a huge team, both globally and regionally and locally, that got it off the ground, and we had to hire people and recruit very quickly. And my role, which was always the business developer, almost became a bit redundant. But my plan was to come back to the UK and see, what opportunities might come this side of the pond, because it was a personal decision that it was time to move back. So my personal challenge at that point was then not being in market, and sort of missing that daily nuance. We had many other brands in the portfolio, so the initial plan was for me to help get them set up on the subsidiary platform, but that didn't quite work out. None of them quite had the power of Speedo at the time, and it was decided to just double down on that.
Right.
And yeah, my opportunity at Pentland was to do what I'd done in China in other markets around the world.
Okay.
But I decided that I wasn't done with China yet. And
I feel like nobody's done with China. People always
no, I thought I considered it, but
you always try to keep a pinky in it, right?
exactly. And then once I decided that it was time to leave Pentland, shortly after I met Jonathan and Hot Pot, and he was looking for someone to help grow a strategy division for him. And that's what I've been doing for the last 6 years, is continuing to work with China, but apply what I learned with Pentland and Speedo to many other brands.
Exactly. So, I mean, I so much has happened in the last 6 years. I think it's interesting to focus on what we are seeing today. And obviously, you were just on the ground. So while we're recording this, Adam was in China, Hong Kong and China a week ago. What was and this was your first time being there since how long?
Since pre-pandemic. Yes, 2019 was the last time.
So what was your feeling? What was the vibe? What was the energy? What were you seeing going around? I mean, not just from a business perspective, but also from a personal perspective. I think a lot of people, actually, I have actually spoken to quite a few people recently who have ventured out to China, but who were all so hesitant about going, not knowing what to expect. So I think it's interesting to hear people's perspectives of what they felt on the ground. And what was that like? I think safety issue is an issue, right? Is it safe to go? Is it okay to go? Can we move around, etc.?
Yeah, I was definitely nervous. Yeah, I was definitely nervous, more nervous than I ever used to be. Like, it was so natural for me to jump on a plane and be in China. Yeah, I didn't quite know what to expect, and you hear and read a lot of negativity as well. But of course, I was excited at the same time. Like, I've always loved being out my comfort zone, and perhaps being out my comfort zone made me even more excited. And yeah, I was amazed. I thought it was incredible. I thought there was a great vibe. Yes, a little bit of negativity from people, but my eyes told me a different story. My eyes told me that there is still huge opportunity here. There was a buzz in retail. There was a buzz in meetings that I went to. There was that, amazing feeling of, big lunches and dinners. Facilities have gone up a notch in terms of businesses that we were talking to. The caliber of people has gone up a notch. And the ambition is still there. And yeah, I guess, things seemed a little bit more orderly and clean.
Okay.
I know that sounds a little bit random, but yeah.
It sounds random to me because Shanghai has always been clean.
But yeah.
I mean, it's a cleanly chaos.
Maybe less chaos. Like, I took a picture of a bunch of bikes on the side of the road, and they were just so neatly lined up, and I was like, but also immaculate. Like, they were clearly new bikes, and sparkling clean. Buildings, meeting rooms, and there was just a great feeling. And I think obviously there was excitement because I was seeing people that I hadn't seen for a long time, and that naturally brought a level of warmth. But I also spent a bit of time sort of walking on my own and reflecting and looking around, and it felt good. Like, people were singing and dancing in the street. On the Sunday I was there, people were in the shops. The luxury and the big brands were all there. There was a lot more local brands there, which is a change, I think. And the store staff were a little bit like less welcoming as I remember, but I understood why, because they were actually, their real selling is clearly happening on WeChat, not in the stores.
Not in the stores, right?
but yeah, it was great. You know, partners were excited to see us. I just felt very welcome. And like, I think if I'd have trusted everything I'd read, I would have been like, well, you know, foreigners are not really wanted here anymore, and foreign brands are not really wanted here anymore. That could not have been further from the truth.
Mm. How did you take the whole, and I bring this up because one of my clients mentioned it to me the other day, and I had to laugh. You haven't been there in 4 years, 3.5 years, 4 years. So how did you get on with the digitalization of the country?
I have to say it was the best I've ever experienced.
Really?
Yeah, Alipay was unbelievable.
Okay. So my client I spoke to actually said, I've got Alipay set up, I've WeChat Pay set up, but the issue for me is that there's always time delays. And then when you're sitting in a taxi and it's not, and you have to get out and it's not working, and then you have to restart your system. And he goes, I wish I could have given the guy just cash, but they won't accept cash, or they don't have change anymore for cash either, right?
I didn't have any issues. The
Whatsoever.
connectivity was great. Had an eSIM which worked seamlessly.
What's an eSIM?
It's not a physical SIM card, just a electronic SIM card that kind of you download it and you go on the network, and worked really well. Yeah, Alipay worked really well. WeChat worked from a comms perspective. Baidu Maps was very helpful. DD was obviously very helpful, and that was integrated within Alipay. So I could pay for everything. I could navigate where I needed to navigate to. I didn't need local colleagues to
help you around.
Right? So it was better than ever, really. You know, I could buy things in the shops. I did have some cash left over, and I did manage to clear the cash. I thought this is a bit useless, but I wonder if someone will take it, and they do take it still. It's just, yeah, as you said, no change.
Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, I found it fine. I also one thing I really made a lot of effort over the last 4 years, and I think it was testament to the meetings that I had, is I made a lot of effort to keep in touch with people. You know, even if it was a weekly or a monthly, hey, how you doing? What's happening on this? It was vital for me to keep up that relationship, but also that knowledge and understanding. So I wasn't surprised by anything that I saw or experienced actually in the end.
So, I mean, I think one point that you touched on that is interesting is the what we see in the media or what we read in the media versus what's the reality on the ground, right? So you are in the side of Hot Pot where you're helping brands with their strategy development, what steps, what actions should they be taking, what execution steps should they be taking.
Yeah.
When you see what you see in the UK and what then every other brand is seeing in the UK, how do you then explain the reality, having just been there a week ago, that's further from the truth? I mean, I think it's clear for everybody to see that the economy has gone down. Okay. We all know that, but I mean, the economy has gone down everywhere in the world. It's not just China, right? I think the expectation, though, is that while other economies have gone down in previous times, China has always sustained itself and risen. At this point, it's not. It's going down just like everybody else. So how do you talk to the brands? You know, how do you say that there's an opportunity?
It's interesting because I think the media take an extreme view. And even though it doesn't sound extreme when you're reading it, it is actually. So take, for example, the property crisis, right? There's no doubt that property prices have gone down in China. There's been a bursting of the bubble and people have been affected by that. But what you don't read is that actually, you know, for what they actually bought this property for, to what the value is now, or what they may even have sold out for 2-3 years ago, they still made a fortune, right? Also, you know, how much have they got in their bank accounts? Savings always been prominent, particularly in the last few years. Like, the money's there. You know, the other trend is, they're holding back. They're a bit less, you know, they're a bit more choosy about their spending. Well, as you become more sophisticated, why wouldn't you be?
Sure.
You're not going to throw money at anything.
Right.
So, choose what you want wisely, and obviously there is a level of social and political unrest and uncertainty as there is throughout the whole world. But again, what's the difference? Does it represent a cooling of the economy? A little bit, yes, but then there's more and more people entering that class that can afford to buy things. So I think for us, it's about tempering the communication and being realistic in terms of what's actually happening, and not allowing that polarization of opinion to arise. And I mean, we were on the ground in China with 3 clients, and just being there with them, experiencing with them, showing them, again, I think there's no substitute for that.
Right.
I do think that that's been a big miss over the last few years. And I think now that executives and people can travel back to China, I think you'll see a lot more positive.
So, I'm curious. I mean, we haven't prepped for this question at all, but I'm just curious from the top of your head.
Yeah.
If a brand would come to you right now, and I think like you, I would probably say I'd encourage them to go to China, right?
Yeah.
So a brand wants to go to China. Probably my first step would be go to China, go physically there and go on the ground. What would you tell them to do when they're there?
I think you've got to visit retail. Got to go and see stores, go to relevant department stores, malls. So we were a luxury client. Go to the luxury malls, see what your global competitors look like, see what the local brands are doing. Talk via us to store staff. Really kind of get a feel for that and watch some consumers if you can, see what they're doing. I think visiting TPs is a great use of time. Visiting platforms, if you have the opportunity to go to Alibaba in Hangzhou or Tencent in Shenzhen, again, a great opportunity to grow. Meet with agencies as well, to get a feel for that vibe on the creative scene, on the brand building scene. And the other thing is just walk around, just walk on the street, watch people. I'm a big people watcher. Go on the train, go on the subway, walk around duty free in the airport. Really kind of be an observer and watcher and really sense it and feel it. I think is absolutely crucial when you get there. And also have some time to reflect. I don't know, look out your hotel window, and kind of take it all in. China is vast. The opportunity is there, but also you've got to give yourself that time while you're on the ground to do it.
Right. And what do you see, if you had to give a reflection on 2023 and potentially a forecast for 2024? I mean, this is, again, a very big topic that we're talking about. But, I can share with you, Adam, what my sentiment is. I was very conservative about 2023. I wasn't sure how this year was going to go. I really thought it was a year of just re-engagement. Let's re-engage with China. Let's get acquainted once again. And if you felt safe and you felt secure, travel there, see how it is on the ground, and see the sentiment and the feeling and whatnot. For me personally, in my business, this year has been wonderful. A lot of companies have greenlit their projects, have pushed forward, truly because the borders have opened, and it seems that all the regulations around COVID have stopped, right? And if you look particularly from summer holiday onwards, I mean, it's like from December 2019, right? In terms of 2024, my projection is a little bit that the economy is down. I think people are still going to struggle. However, as people gain confidence, they're going to greenlight their projects and they're going to move forward. Probably we're not going to see the numbers that we saw pre-COVID, but I still think we're going to see better numbers than we saw in the last 3 years. And it will just be a much slower growth rate, but very stable and and enough to also be able to catch up, where you might not need to have to add headcount, or, where you can still maintain your cost, but still grow slightly. So that's my perspective. I think you still have to be aware that it's a struggling market, but from your perspective, how do you feel 2023 was in your eyes?
I always would almost mirror your sentiments. I think 2023 has been tough, but I think the way you described it as a year of re-engagement, a year of reconnecting,
yeah,
it really feels like that. And I agree with you that sort of post summer and really opening up from a COVID perspective has made a massive difference. I still think there's a level of caution and a level of concern, and again, the more people go, the more that will unlock. So I think this holding pattern will continue a little bit into the new year.
Right.
But I think towards the back end of next year and into 2025, I think you'll start to see a lot more positivity and a lot more movement. Obviously, geopolitics aside, we can't operate on those realms. But yeah, no. And yeah, I think that's kind of the general direction of travel. I think one thing that has really been missing, particularly for new brands, if I think back to the way that brands used to succeed in the China market, they would always go in with a great platform of global awareness from Chinese consumers. Because Chinese haven't traveled as much, that platform hasn't been there.
Right.
So I think what's going to happen in 24 is you're going to start to see a lot more Chinese traveling abroad again, a lot more global brands picked up by them.
Yeah.
Maybe the Daigou industry will pick up again if
right.
it's allowed to. And I think that will present a whole new raft of demand and therefore confidence for brands to go back.
I haven't heard that perspective yet, and I think it's a really interesting one that hasn't been touched on, at least in the podcast, is this fact that there will be more Chinese people that travel. I mean, we're seeing it already now, right? Funnily enough, I was in the furthest tip of the heel of Italy over the summer.
Right.
So a place I've traveled to for over the last 10 years. Never seen an Asian person ever there.
Right.
And there was a bus of mainland Chinese people.
Yeah.
Who were there. And I found it fascinating. So, people are slowly moving. They're gaining the confidence. They're also being allowed to go out and move. And I also want to say business people are traveling. Chinese business people are starting to move out as well. All right. And there is this movement that is happening too.
And they're gonna bring things back with them.
Right. Yes. Exactly.
Experiences, be it
products.
Yeah. So I think that's something that you'll see more and more of, or a return to.
So moving then on, I mean, I know this is a bit of a controversial question, but I think it's a really interesting question. I am not a marketeer. I'm on the corporate administration side, but I am curious to know. We're recording this on the 23rd of November. About 10 days ago, 12 days ago, there was 11/11.
Yeah.
And I've heard really interesting things coming out of some of my clients' mouths about their experience with 11/11. What did you see on 11/11? And again, people don't want to hear the stats. I think they just want to hear the experience level of it,
Yeah, look, I was there when it first kicked off. I was sat in the TP's office in 2012 watching the numbers fly in at midnight. And, it was like, oh my God, this is unbelievable.
Yeah.
What is happening here? This is just unprecedented, right the way through to where we are, or where we were a couple of years ago. I don't think it's dying, but it's losing its yeah, I think so. And I don't know. I don't think it will. I think it will still be here next year, but will it be here in the next 2 or 3 years?
Why not?
Not.
I think there's too much hype around.
There's too much hype, and you know, the discount driven strategy is not proving successful.
Well, I think I personally think the issue is when you can give discounts. I don't mind if you give discounts, but you still need to make some money off of it.
Well, that's what I mean.
Right?
I think brands used to look at Double 11 as like a loss leader, right? Get the traffic in, fine, you lose money, it's marketing, whatever. You know, you've got the consumer hooked on your product, they'll buy throughout the year. But then of course they didn't buy throughout the year, they just waited till 618 and then they wait again for Double 11.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, when am I going to make money out of this? And I think that's the concern. And one thing I'm feeling is actually, or I felt, was that, you know, offline, everyone's talked about e-commerce and online. You know, offline still takes up the majority of sales across most categories. And I do wonder whether that kind of WeChat private traffic, but actually buying offline, A, is more popular with consumers, B, is it becomes more profitable for brands again. Tmall is so expensive to operate on. So yeah, I hesitate to give a definitive opinion on Double 11 because it always has a magical allure to me because it was, you know, a very formative part of my China career. But yeah, it just didn't. Put it this way, I landed into Shanghai on Double 11, and I felt and heard very little.
Me too.
Like, no one talked about
Not the hype that there used to be.
No one talked about it. I went out for dinner with people.
And I'm the one who's actually bringing it up. So before, people would talk very positively about it, and nobody's really doing it, which is why I wanted to bring it up.
I almost forgot it. I honestly almost forgot it had happened.
Right.
Like, because A, I was swept up in the emotion of seeing people after a long time, of course, but B, like, no one talked about it. I didn't see any. In fact, I didn't see any signs anywhere. I think I saw more signs in the UK.
Interesting.
Promoting Double 11. I just didn't. Just wasn't there. Yeah, and obviously our clients, mixed experience, TPs, mixed experiences, certain categories up, certain categories down. You're always going to have that, right? But yeah, I hesitate to give an opinion because it just didn't. It wasn't a big discussion when I was there.
Right. Well, I think you make a very good point about will we see it in 2-3 years, right? I think it's going to be something that, actually, with all of these days, 6, 18, 11, I mean, I don't know how many there are in a year, but it seems like there are more and more each year, which makes it, each one is not as huge as it used to be.
Yeah. I always thought things like category days would become more prominent, as in you would have a sports day or a skincare day, or
right,
you know, and then you have the super brand days as well, which obviously is specific focus on brand, but again, they're so expensive to participate in.
Right.
But you know, maybe you'll move to a more nuanced approach to promotion or spotlighting, which could be more appealing to particular people.
Right. Well, I mean, I've taken up already way too much of your time, but I always do want to finish these podcast episodes with the one tip you would give yourself on the first day. I don't know, you can decide whether you choose Beijing or Ningbo, but on the first day that you arrived in China, what would you tell yourself? What advice would you give yourself?
Take clothes for all seasons. I think I assumed China was a hot country before I went. I don't have many regrets. I think it's. I would say just, if someone told me never say no, I do think you do need to say no sometimes. But the sentiment is right. Like, get involved. Like, don't hold back. You know, maybe there were times where I was tired or like I didn't really want to do something, and I kind of, you know, embraced it half measure. You know, but actually, you know, if I was to look back, those are the best experiences I had. And I think actually, you know, embracing those and being in the moment at all times in China is probably the best piece of advice I could have given myself. And I did that at times, but of course there are times where you don't. You you lose yourself, and you have the frustrations. But,
So
yeah,
when is your next trip to China?
either immediately pre or probably just after Chinese New Year will be the next.
Because I see the energy it's given you. And,
Yeah, I think it's really important to,
yeah.
yeah, definitely. I knew it would.
Yeah,
Yeah, obviously I have to balance family commitments and
like we all do. Yeah.
but yeah, look, it's there. I don't think it's going anywhere. I think foreign brands and foreigners, as they call us on the visa form, thankfully it's not aliens anymore.
Exactly. I was just about to say
Yeah.
that's new. Usually I'm an alien.
Yeah, you're not an alien anymore. Yeah, we can go back. We can
Yeah.
experience it. We can enjoy it. We can have those relationships. We can eat that wonderful food.
Exactly.
So yeah, I'm excited to go back, and I'm optimistic. I feel more optimistic than I did about well, for brands, and for business in general and relationships with even the UK. Hey, David Cameron's back. So yeah, we'll see.
Okay. Well, Adam, thank you so much for joining. I'm hoping I can get you back on next year to kind of reflect on Q1.
Yeah, sure.
And give people a bit of insight on your next trip to China, but also on what's happening in Q1 and how we can kind of predict for the rest of the year as well. So people just get a bit more of an understanding from us who do this on a daily basis.
Sounds good. Well, thank you for the opportunity. I've really enjoyed the chat. So yeah.
Thank you, Adam.
A few memories from
back in the day. Exactly.
Back in the day.
Take care.
Thanks.
Bye.
Episode, and you'd like to help support the podcast and/or the YouTube channel, please share it with others. Post about it on social media or leave a rating and review. Now, can Woodburn help you? I am offering a free 30-minute call where we discuss the obstacles you are encountering on your China business journey and how perhaps we can help accelerate your success. The link to my diary is in the show notes. I look forward to speaking with you.